Hi, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to share some lessons learned. I've got my nice new 12,000 XP, which replaced my old EG4, which has been a workhorse for about a year and a half. It's taken care of a significant amount of the loads around my house. Initially, it was just supposed to take care of the air conditioning through the summer and be a kind of a battery backup, but it just worked so great. I incorporated the refrigerator and a couple of other critical loads, and it has kept them alive for a year and a half solid. And so I want to jump in with these lessons learned. But first, I want to thank Gavin Stone from Do It Yourself Homestead for always being very informative and also having kind of a similar uh, need. So that was always a good reference for me. And also Ray Lovelace, Do It Yourself Solar Fun. And of course, Will Prouse, who really got me hooked in the first place that this was even a possibility. Um, so my current setup here was inspired by Ray's easy do-it-your-home backup solar power system and battery with 6000 XP install and test. Ray, a shorter title. That's a mouthful, but it says it all. It really does. And that inspiration, I just pretty much followed along with exactly what he did, except instead of using the 6000 XP, I used the 12,000. So I'm not going to bother trying to show you my wiring in here, any of that. It is as vanilla as it gets. Just like the diagram shows, I've got my leads from the utility coming in here, and then I've got my leads heading out to my service panel here. And inside, I did do one thing I'd like to share. I painted my solar generator source red so that it's painfully obvious that something is different. All of my breakers are labeled individually. I also highlighted here that I have, an alternate form of energy coming in, and of course, a block to make sure that I can't be on both utility and solar at the same time. So anyway, those were a couple minor things that I did. But back to the focus here, I'm going to do a little bit of reading because I just want to get through this quickly and make sure that I've shared everything that was important that I learned in dealing with this 12,000 XP in particular. One of the things in the instructions, they want you to get it out of standby mode for some of the steps. You have to turn the EPS out to the on position for it to jump out of standby. Whenever the EPS out switch is off, at least in my case, it would just go back to standby mode. So that had me scratching my head a little bit. Obviously, you need the unit mounted vertically, although I did plug it into batteries and turn it on the first time laying on its back just to make sure that everything was operational. I did some waveform tests with the oscilloscope, things of that nature, made sure that my voltages were right before hefting this thing up onto the wall. Anyway, breaker sizing. I note that Gavin, I think it was Gavin, when he installed the 12,000 XP, used a 50 amp breaker because that's what this thing's rated to output. However, it dawned on me, and I did a little homework, and I believe the proper breaker sizing for your service panel and the wire feeding it should be rated for 100 amps. Because if you're going to be connected to the utility company, maybe Gavin is not, but I am. If you're connected to the utility company, this can pass through up to 100 amps. So you need all of your wiring and your breakers, of course, to be able to be safe when 100 amps is potentially running through the system. So for that reason, my wire gauge is a bit heftier, and my breaker in the panel is a 100 amp breaker. So wire sizing is critical. The manual shows you can either run a pair for each positive and negative of 2-aught or a single 4-aught. I opted to go with a single 4-aught since I was ordering everything together as a package from Signature Solar. I already had 4 Life Power 4 batteries. I ordered 2 more, so I have 4 of the version 1s, 2 of the version 2s, and my cabinet is full. So there was also a little bit of back and forth in my homework and research trying to figure out how to make the version 2s talk to the version 1s. And as others here have said, it does work. It is not as straightforward as I would have liked. Cutting away all of the communication cable except for positions 7 and 8 is absolutely accurate. And what I did, I'm not going to pull out the actual cord, but for illustration purposes, rather than trying to cut near the head of the connector, I thought to myself, wouldn't it be easier to tape the middle? So I used a razor blade, split this open, kind of give it a little bend until I got the wires starting to pop out, pulled the sheathing down out of the way, found my two position 7 and 8 brown and white with a brown stripe wires, separated them, snipped the rest of the group, and I actually removed about a 1/4 inch so they couldn't come in contact with each other when this was straightened out and taped up. And then had my own little fancy connector to go from the version 2s to the version 1s. That absolutely worked as stated in other people's videos. AC input range modes. So I'm set to UPS mode, and that will switch in less than 10 milliseconds, kind of 10 milliseconds being the outside. It also tightens the range values if the utility company goes out, 170 volts to 280 volts. However, in that mode and setting my cutoff point at 25% for my batteries, it's a few days after Christmas, we had the oven going, the microwave going, the toaster oven going, the dryer. For some reason, there was somebody doing laundry in the house, hair dryers, lights on everywhere, Christmas lights, the whole house full of people, and this didn't miss a beat. Ran the batteries down all the way down, hit my 25% mark on the settings, flipped us back to the utility automatically. No one was the wiser. I didn't know, and I was kind of watching for it, thinking, well, if any day it's going to do it, this will be the day. And sure enough, it did. It got down to 25%, clicked over, not even a flicker of the lights. It was beautiful. It was as if nothing happened. The little diagram on the screen changed, the little diagram on the app changed, but aside from that, I wouldn't have known that we had shifted back onto the utility. So at the moment, that takes me to the other thing. I've only got 7 kilowatts of panels up on my hillside, and I ordered, when I purchased this unit and my extra 2 batteries, I ordered another 11 kilowatts in panels. So I will be adding those to the system. First, I will be adding enough to, as closely as I can, max out the first MPPT on this machine. And then with the remaining panels, they will service the second MPPT with whatever that amounts to. So I'm going to have about 10.5 kilowatts, because I can't quite hit 12 with the voltage and amperages that my panels are. But I'm going to have about 10.5 kilowatts feeding MPPT1, and I estimate somewhere around 5 kilowatts feeding MPP2. But that additional, 10 kilowatts roughly should put me over the top where I'm only using the utility if we have really dark days for more than 3 or 4 at a time. And that is the goal, is to be away from the utility company. All right, so that covers kind of configuration. Ground bonding. This does have built in a neutral to protective earth. PE is how they refer to it in the manual, PE protective earth. It has a ground bond that is disabled by default and should be disabled if your panel already has a neutral to earth bond going on. So it is not dynamic. So to be clear, the bond in here is not dynamic. It is either on or it is off, and the default is that it is disconnected and assumes that you have a proper ground bond in your service panel. Phase matching. It's critical even for single phase systems. So if you want to kind of follow the normal recommended trend of using the red stripe as your line 2, and you're consistent, line 2 coming in, line 2 going out, all match with the utility company and everything. That's very important. The other thing is that you can kind of confirm your phase matching using your voltmeter, because I didn't have anything sophisticated that would just tell me if we were in or out of phase. A little quick Google search and find that if I go from line 2 on the utility to line 2 on the output from the inverter, I should be getting 0 volts. Now, if there's a little bit of transient voltage or difference in the output level between one and the other, you might get a few volts. In my case, I had about 10 volts on one line and 2 volts on the other. So I know that I'm in phase. That's as close as it's going to get with my configuration and my setup. So phase matching is very important, even though I'm only on a single phase using a single inverter. Solar integration, the MPPTs, I didn't realize when I ordered this, can be programmed to work as a single MPPT or as 2 separate MPPTs, where each one handles 12 kilowatts. So in my case, I am not going to have all of the panels that are assigned to MPPT1. They will be on a single plane, looking at the sun from a particular angle that is the same for all the panels. But I don't have that luxury for the remaining panels. It's going to be a squeeze to make it happen on the first one. The other panels are going to have a slightly off-axis angle to the sun, and so therefore I really want the MPPTs to be working separately so that I can maximize output from both. It doesn't indicate whether or not that can be changed on the fly in the future, but for now, I think that's going to be best in my case. And I did find it interesting it had that option. Battery integration. So when you're using version 2s and version 1s like I did, and as has been stated on other videos, the firmware version matters. I had to update the firmware on my version 2s, even though, I just received them a few weeks ago. And I had to update my version 1s, which hadn't been updated in about a year and a half. I did run into trouble with one battery. It had a cell in overcharge condition, and so I had to hook it back up to the old inverter just by itself, and I ran a heat gun for about 20 minutes, which brought that one battery down by about 10%, which ensured that the cell that was slightly overcharged and reporting an error is now under control. And it allowed me to do the firmware update and get everything working. So I have all 6 batteries working as a set. I did communicate with Signature Solar. We are currently kind of going back and forth to determine whether or not something's actually wrong with the battery and it needs to be serviced, replaced, or what have you. So that's an ongoing thing, not concerned here, but did have to have the firmware, as stated before, updated. System operation. So it is best practice to engage your load panel with either your breakers off or confirm that inside the house, whatever's running from the system is minimal. So when I first fired up, I had the 2 refrigerators and some overhead lights basically were the only things on when it engaged. So that was a load of about 4, maybe 500 watts. Not very much. And then as other systems came online, the electric oven, the electric stove, it was no problem. In fact, I've hardly heard these fans wind up. Of course, it is cold. It's December. It's the garage. So it may not need the extra cooling right now. But I've only heard the fans rev up on Christmas Day when, like I said, full house, everything going. And it really wasn't even as loud as my old 6000 EX. So very happy with that. So the working modes, this unit, the default is what they call self-consumption, which is to use the solar coming in off the panels, then the battery, and then the utility as the last resort, and to make every effort to stay off the utility. That's perfect for me. It's exactly what I wanted. It does have a couple of other modes where those are changed. The descriptors aren't the same as on the older units, so it was a little confusing to me, but they call that mode self-consumption. I think they used to just call it SBU mode, solar battery utility. But self-consumption means you are trying to live off the grid. Some troubleshooting. I think I mentioned already that the EPS switch has to be on to get you out of standby mode. Make sure your phase matched, watch your firmware versions, pay attention to temperature management and proper ventilation. This unit is my backup. It is not in front of any of the exhaust fans on this unit, so I know it's too close, but the exhaust fans have nothing blocking them, and I have plenty of room here for the intake. I also have right above the camera a 20-inch box fan that is pointed at this wall to help improve circulation in the summertime because the garage does get pretty warm, and I may even update that a little bit later. Um, anyway, that's that. I just wanted to share. Machine's working perfectly. I so far have zero complaints, and everything went just as smooth as can be. And I hope if you buy one of these that you have the same experience.